As a lot of states begin to reopen, it's an important question for us to ask as pastors and church leaders. Is this the right time and way for us to reopen? In this video, I'm going to explore 3 questions that we should be asking before we jump back into reopening church as usual or as normal. Welcome to my channel. My name is Lane. This is Preaching Donkey. As we get into this today, I want to put something free in your hands. This is my free 21-day guide to creating killer sermons. You can check it out at preachingdonkey.com/21days. The link is also in the description. It's just a 3-week, 21-day guide that will walk you through a preparation and delivery process for your sermons. Whether you've been preaching for a long time or you're totally a novice at it, there's something in this guide for you. So again, that's free to you as my gift. I know that at this point, you may be back into your buildings meeting weekly, depending on what state you're in, depending on what the restrictions are. But I want to speak to those of you who might be in a state or might be in a place where you haven't yet completely gone back into meeting in your physical spaces. And I want to make the case today for why when the thing opens back up, it might not be the best idea to rush back into reopening. I'm borrowing some of this content from a really good video by Larry Osborne that is linked in the description if you want to check it out. What he said is some of the things that we as a church were already thinking. And I just thought, man, this would be a really good thing for me to share with you today because I definitely agree with a lot of what he said. So definitely check out his video. But the 3 things to consider is this. Number 1 is the quality of the experience. Number 2 is the kids. And number 3 is worship. Okay, so just to kind of give you some perspective here. In my state, which is Tennessee, during the month of May, you can technically go back to in-person meetings. However, there are a lot of restrictions, okay? So the main restrictions that are pretty common across the board, but when it comes to churches, here's what they are in Tennessee. You have to wear a mask, everybody in the building. You have to be 6 feet apart, and you cannot have any kind of kids ministry or classes or groups of any kind. So everybody's just in the auditorium together. So this sounds pretty standard across the board, what most churches are doing, what most businesses are doing. But let's talk about it in the perspective of 3 things. Number 1, quality. What kind of experience is it going to be when you go back to church and everybody has to have a mask on and everybody has to sit 6 feet apart? There's some interesting studies that show the impact of the size of the room and the number of people in it. So one of the other restrictions in my state, and these are common across the board, is you can only have 50% capacity. So the room can only be 50% full. And then beyond that, people have to sit 6 feet apart based on like a family unit. So a family unit here, 6 feet in front, 6 feet behind, 6 feet to the side, 6 feet to the other side. Can't be anybody else around them. So if you're an individual and you go and you don't have a family, you're just sitting all by yourself in a room that's half empty and where people are spread out like crazy. So right away, the quality of the experience from just a energy creation perspective is just abysmal. I mean, that's just the worst kind of environment to be engaged in what's going on. Have you ever been to something where you're one of the only people in the room? You start to feel like, should I be here? Is this worth my time? Have you ever tried to sing with a mask on? It's difficult to do. I think it's going to be difficult to have a quality experience like what we're used to and like what we've been able to create online through virtual churches. Now, the second thing to consider is kids. So not only is there no kids ministry, so think about this. You bring your kids back to church, they're looking around, you got to try to get them to stay 6 feet away from everybody, which kids can't do. I have 4 kids, 5 and under. They do not know how to social distance. It is not a thing kids do. So you got to try to get them to wear a mask. You got to try to get them to stay 6 feet apart. And then you're going to take them into that auditorium that's half empty and try to have a church service with kids hanging all over the place, screaming, yelling, all that kind of stuff from every age, from birth through whatever grade. Some kids can handle it better than others, but that's just something to consider. And also the message that it inevitably is going to send to kids like, hey, we're back, but it's not church as you know it or as you like it or as you understand it. So just something to consider. Might not be the best time to rush into weekly services on Sunday when that's the case. The third thing to consider is worship. So in the environment that I talked about, with the quality as it is, okay, it's 50%, 6 feet apart, everybody wearing masks, kids are in there, tons of distractions. It's going to be very difficult to worship, to be able to focus, to be able to engage in the service, to be able to engage in singing, to be able to track with the message when, even if your kids aren't there, because they're, maybe you don't have kids, the other kids are screaming. You're in this environment where you're so far away from everybody that it just feels so disconnected. I don't know. It just seems to me like if you're in a place where maybe your state hasn't fully opened up yet and you're making plans to go back, it might be wise to pause and say, before we commit to weekly services under these guidelines, let's dip our toes in the water and see what this is actually going to be like. Maybe you do a night of worship or a service on a different day other than Sunday, so you can just see, what is it going to feel like? What is it going to look like when we go back into this kind of thing? That's what we're doing at our church. One, to get everybody back together, but two, just to see, like, what is this even going to feel like before we commit to an every Sunday kind of thing doing this? Because I'll be honest with you, our micro churches that I've talked about a lot on this channel that meet via Zoom right after the broadcast service on Sunday, those micro churches are going great. People are connected in some ways better than they ever have been because of the high touch nature of the service and getting people connected in these micro churches. We're just not in a rush to kill that just so that we can have people physically in buildings when it's going to feel and look and be so drastically different than anything that we've ever experienced. I would just hate it if you went back to church as normal and you tried to follow the guidelines and be compliant and it was an awful experience. Well, now you got to think about, well, what do I do now? Do I go back to doing virtual church? It's kind of hard to go backwards once you've opened the door. I don't know what the right answer is for your church. That's for you to decide. I'm just giving you my opinion that it might be in your best interest to try to keep things going online if they're going well. And I've got a lot of videos in this playlist right here on what it looks like to do virtual church well. I would love for you to check that out. Let me know in the comments, what have you learned in this process? If you have gone back to church in a building, church in your building, and you're following the guidelines, what has that looked like? What has been your experience? And if you haven't gone back, what is your plan for going back? When do you think you will re-enter church life? I can just tell you at my church, because of how much everything just changes from month to month and week to week, we haven't really committed to any specific plan other than every single time they release a new set of requirements, we just look at them, we try to be compliant, and we try to make the best decision for us. So these are just some things that we're thinking about. I would love to hear from you in the comments. If you got value out of this video, be sure to subscribe, give this video a like, and I will see you in the next one.